Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. It's been forever since I've done a Market Monday on this channel. So let's get back in the swing of things and start things off with talking about Final Fantasy. So we have the $1,000,000 question looming over our heads. What will Final Fantasy end up doing to the market? Will we be entering into a scenario very similar to Lord of the Rings, where it crashes everything not called Lord of the Rings, and eventually, when the dust did settle with Lord of the Rings itself did really stagnate and fall in price after it got its second and third waves of being reprinted. Now, there is an announcement already for Final Fantasy. We're hearing mid-July, which is actually longer than I thought it was going to take Wizards of the Coast to start getting Commander and Play Boosters back into the cycle or into the distribution. So the market has responded to that with basically everything continuing to go up. There are a few exceptions with Final Fantasy, but I have been impressed with how much the market has been able to absorb the Final Fantasy product. And the singles market also has some very interesting things going on as well. So there's a lot of theorization about the singles because we should be seeing single prices just absolutely collapse. And there has been particular cards that if we go over here and look at the cards, there have been some significant decreases. Like Vivi was the chase card out of the set and it was going for about $100, and now it's halved in value. And some of the other chase cards, even like Sephiroth, is halved in value. So we are seeing that the amount of products or cards coming into the market as we normally see crashing the price of cards. But I actually expected the price decrease on the vast majority of cards from the set to be even greater than it is now. Of course, there is cards that were selling for $20, $30 all the way back down to $2 as predicted. I don't know if you watch my Rogue Market channel or my Gonor Games channel, but I got in not a little bit of controversy because I think that everyone knew this was going to happen. But I told people not to pre-order and had a little bit of pushback with people saying, Kevin, you don't understand the amount of collectors that are going to be buying things from this set. And my response was, it doesn't matter. This is Wizards of the Coast. They're going to print and print and print this product. And we saw it with Lord of the Rings, where everyone chasing one or two cards led to the collapse of the rest of the cards, no matter how good the card was. So I think the card that I was talking about was the Cactus. And I can't think of the Cactus off the top of my head because it's pre-selling for something like $50. And I said it's going to be a bulk rare. And I believe it's not quite down to that rate, or I said maybe like $1 or $2, but it is definitely down below the $10 range at this point, and it will continue to go down because anything that this is, I will talk about this till I'm blue in the face about how Magic differs from things like Pokemon. Pokemon is such a collector's market that collectors will start to outstretch the supply on most things that are being collected, and the prices inevitably will go up over time. Magic the Gathering is a utility-based game that has collectability. So certain cards, it's usually the exception to the rule, not the rule. Typically, there will always be a bottom or a top, a peak of what a Magic card can be unless it's ultra collectible. And we see them fail time and time again, going back to like Shieldred when they did the Phyrexian wording, the lettering of Shieldred, and it was supposed to be this ultra collectible card. And oftentimes the foil Phyrexian version would be the cheapest version because it is a utility-based game. People were buying Shieldreds to put in decks. They weren't buying Shieldreds to collect, and the people that were buying Shieldreds to collect were not outstretching the supply. The demand of those purchases were not outstretching the supply in any significant way to outpace the demand of the utility. So I think that Final Fantasy is going to follow this as well, and also have the added pressure from there will be ultra collectible cards that the collectors will be targeting, but those will be the only ones. And so anything not having ultra collectability or ultra utility is going to collapse in value. So we are still impressed though with the overall rate of these cards selling. If we actually take a look at like the amount of Vivis sold per day, it's still very, very high. And this should start to be plateauing out after the pre-release and release weekend. And as you can see just today, we're pages and pages and pages in the amount of Vivis that have been sold. Like how many times I clicked this now? Like 5 times, and now we're finally on to yesterday's sales. So regardless, though, the price continues to go down. So that is indicating that there is a lot of supply that's being entered in the market because no matter how many copies are sold, there are still more people listing VV. So that's when I tell people when you look at TCG data, like I've seen a lot of other YouTubers say, oh, this is 213 sold and there's only 280 left. This is going to take only a few days to, if you actually look at the average sold per day, this is giving us some pretty bad data. As it clicked on foil here, I think that's the, let's get it off. Let's go on the normal here. So 38 sold per day, for example, and there's only 280 left. So it'd be like, oh, less than 10 days in the entire, this has to go up, because if you just do a simple math here, that there's going to be 380 sold in 30 days, not 280 that are available, and after a month that means that there won't be any available. That's just not how it's working. I wish TCU would actually say how many are listed per day and kind of give the spread there, and that would give us a better idea of where things are going. So if we can look at price data though, with the card continuing to go down, there have been some, of course, moments where it's gone back up because it's all over the place, with anywhere from the low being sold for this particular copy at $37 and the high of $54. We know that this is just a wild, wild west right now, with cards being listed, cards being purchased. And again, it's showing a lot. This is a very, very healthy market for Final Fantasy. So it isn't just a collector's. Like Lord of the Rings, there was a lot more worrisome factors with the One Ring, and there would be a lot of purchases on things like Orcish Bowmasters or the One Ring. And no matter how many cards were sold out of a particular card that was seeing playing Commander, or kind of an offshoot collector card, the supply entering would never, ever, ever outstretch, or the demand would never outstretch the supply of those cards. So it is nice to see that there is a huge market for singles. And one of the things that I'm also starting to think about this set is I don't think there was a lot of mass box openers for the Final Fantasy set. I think that all the sealed product was just too juicy to sell, that instead of going the usual people that used to crack cases of things, decided just to go the sealed route to recoup their capital and actually make good profit. Typically, when we see a lot of sets that have pretty bad, especially play boosters compared to distributor costs, a lot of the more savvy online sellers will decide to go the route of just cracking packs. And it also creates like a weird scenario in Magic the Gathering to where a set actually is kind of a cold set. The single prices, especially the cards that do see play, where I'm talking, a good example of this is Murders of Karlov Manor with the Surveil lands. The Surveil lands are only worth that much, not because they're necessarily, I mean, they're actually quite lackluster in the scope of things for dual lands. I mean, most people decide to use them because there's no better alternatives they do go in, certain decks that do want to fill the graveyard, but in reality, they're usually slightly better than a temple that just scries for one. And even though it does have the double land type, I know there's a lot of other things going on with it that gives it a better utility than the temples. They basically are strictly just slightly better than the temples. However, the price does not indicate where the temples have ever been, even the release when they originally released clear back in Theros. But the main reason that the lands out of Murders of Karlov Manor were so expensive was it just wasn't being opened. There was no appeal for the casual player to open up boxes. It wasn't being drafted. No one liked the set. And then single prices actually skyrocketed because of that. And it gives you kind of the misdirection of what I'm trying to say. You're thinking, oh man, this must be a hot set because these cards are going up. When in reality, they're going up because it's a cold set. So it's really interesting with Final Fantasy that we're actually seeing kind of the best of both worlds. It's an incredibly, incredibly popular set. And the card prices are still staying very steady. And it is going down, though, is what we're looking for these particular cards. So we actually look at sealed product. We have some interesting things here. Some cards that were kind of lagging, or some products that were lagging behind, are starting to increase. The things like the Final Fantasy Japanese. This was more or less a rejected product compared to the English versions. So, of course, English versions had the chocobos, which is what everyone is still trying to chase. But now that those are incredibly expensive, this is a product that looked very appealing. And now the market is showing that it did have that dip and they're going back up. There are a few other things, though, that are quite worrisome. I think if we go back over to kind of the Final Fantasy products, there are the Collector Commanders is a product that is dipping. So if we actually look at the Final Fantasy Collector Commanders, this is something that is very interesting because this, in products in the past like the Warhammer, and I'm trying to think when they did these other collector commanders in the past, this was something that typically aged a lot better and a lot quicker than most products. However, this one has just been on a decline. So it did have a bit of a bump back up to 1,200 on the end of May and is just actually fallen quite steadily, and we can actually get these for about $850. So I actually do have a few. Like, I'm kind of peeved because there was a distributor that offered me one at $895, and it was selling at the time for like $1,100. So I'm like, yeah, this is just an easy buy, and I'll just flip it easy. And I kind of held on to it, and I'm actually losing money on a collector commander. But other than that, most of the products are still aging quite well. If we actually look at the play boosters from Final Fantasy, I mean, this is just phenomenal that it's able to now go above $200 a booster box. So it just cracked the 200 today. This is distributor price for these. I think out the door was $130. So stores are actually making really good margins on this particular product. And as I stated, we aren't going to see a restock until the mid-July. So I guess that's the age-old question with the singles market too, or the kind of $1 million question with the singles market is, are these going to dry up to the point the demand will continue for the singles prices, or will just the flood of people still opening and chasing cards because they can still get play boosters, is that going to flood the market with singles, and we'll see the single prices kind of start to trend down? So it'll be interesting in the future to see exactly where Final Fantasy goes. So we're going to look at some other products now to give the overall feel of the market. So as I stated, the $1 million question is where is this market going to go? Is it going to be like Lord of the Rings, or is it going to be, as I stated in one of my videos, compared to more like Surging Sparks or Twilight Masquerade from Pokemon? And what was interesting about those two sets is they basically, a rising tide, I guess, lifts all boats kind of analogy here, that you would think that something that was struggling and you finally have a hot set would just lead to those sets selling, and then people just waiting for the new sets like Prismatic Evolutions. But we actually saw with Surging Sparks is both happened. People were looking for the new sets like Prismatic Evolutions, like Destiny's Rivaled, but everything in Pokemon, because people could not get Twilight Masquerade and Surging Sparks, started going up in price. And so over the next few weeks, it'll be interesting to look at, okay, what about sets that I think are great right now in comparison? I think one of the Tarkir, I think actually has a better set. Like Duskmourn, I think actually is packed full of more value and more iconic cards in the long run than something like Tarkir. Now I know that Tarkir is going to be more nostalgic, and people just ate that product up because it was finally a set that felt like Magic. But if you look at the overall like cards that are being played, decks that really have just a bunch of punch in them, a lot of them are going to be the Duskmourn cards. So I'm keeping an eye on things like the Duskmourn House War play boosters to see if we can see that Surging Spark effect. If not being able to get Final Fantasy, or now we get people that are buying Final Fantasy. I think that's what happened with Surging Sparks and Twilight Masquerade and Pokemon, is then all the people that got back into the hobby started working backwards. And we saw a huge, at first, in the Scarlet and Violet era of people buying up any boxes from Scarlet and Violet, and then we saw people targeting cheap products from the era before that. And if you don't know Pokemon, I'm not making any sense to you. I'm just trying to compare these games together to try to predict how this market will go. So with Surging Sparks, the big boom that happened, the big resurgence in Pokemon, people started working backwards, and then they would target the set before it, like as Paldea evolved first, and then we started seeing things like Obsidian Flames, and then people started going back even to the rotation before, and targeting things that had been very, very lackluster. Like Fusion Strike was a joke for a long time, where at one point you could get just packs for like $130 if you open up the supplemental products from Fusion Strike. And now if you look at the market for those type of things from Pokemon, they're up to like $10. So that is kind of where I'm trying to gauge where this market will go with Magic the Gathering. And I think that Duskmourn is going to be kind of the litmus test for if we're going into a Lord of the Rings versus we're going into what Pokemon did. And we actually look at more data. It's not very encouraging with play boosters. There are just about a half dozen sold per day. And you don't see an increase. Like one of the ways with using TCG Player is you can actually go from 1 year to 6 months to 3 months to 1 month. And if there's an increase in these average daily sold, then you kind of get a good feel of where this market is going. But another good feel, though, is to see how stable it is. Like this is not a product that has really gone out of stock at distribution level. We've seen a kind of this roller coaster here of prices, but it's just when a big seller probably puts on a new batch of stuff, because you can get these. This is still profitable for some stores that can really have tight margins. I think that you can get, is Duskmorn, how many packs is Duskmorn? I can't remember if this is one of the more expensive one, if you can get it at 105, or if this is one you can get 115. I think that this distribution price is close to 110 or 115 if I remember correctly for Duskmorn. So another one though is look at other products that are of course not still in print from the Duskmorn era, and you can look at things like the Duskmorn House of Horror bundle. So this was a product that was absolutely hot, and then it cooled off quite significantly. Here you can see a big price decrease from the $100 back down to about $70, and now it's approaching back up to the 95. And again, this is something that is seeing consistent sales per day, and no more are being listed. And this product and the collector boosters are the two that I'm really keeping my eye on from Duskmorn, because I say Duskmorn is kind of the perfect set for anticipating where the market is going, because it's not something that's nostalgic or has that kind of awe factor of Tarkir that just led to a lot of people wanting to buy this product because it felt magic. It is really what I would call the utility driven set. It's the best gauge for the health of magic as far as people wanting to buy cards, especially moving backwards, like, okay, I'm getting into Final Fantasy, how can I upgrade my Final Fantasy cards into Standard or even into Commander? They're going to start working backwards, and this is going to be the set that's the most accessible, because Tarkir is a little more expensive for things like collector boosters and Commander, and even play boosters oftentimes more expensive. And this one still does have that kind of wow factor of being a very competent product. So if we start to see the prices of collector boosters going up in this time period of this mass printing of Final Fantasy, then we really have a winner of a market going on right now, and I can officially declare this to really be a bull. And maybe it'll be somewhere in between, but right now that's where I'm kind of leaning on. So I guess my question in the comment section, we're going to kind of keep this Market Monday a little bit shorter than normal, is where do you think this one going? Is there any other products you're looking at? Like I tried to go back to Lord of the Rings, but Lord of the Rings is still a weird market for Lord of the Rings, because my first initial feeling of where I thought Final Fantasy players would go is the people getting back into Magic because of Universes Beyond, is maybe they'd stick to Universes Beyond. We'd see like Assassin's Creed or Lord of the Rings. But it seems that Lord of the Rings is still pretty meh. It just had its, I believe, last printing of Commander decks. And if we look, let's just go at the sealed product for the Lord of the Rings, and we look at the overall case. So this does look like it still is trending a little bit down, and there aren't a lot sold per day, and there's still quite a bit of inventory here left on TCG Player compared to where, I mean, how many are sold in like 1 month. So yeah, this is really decreased for sure. So yeah, it's not happening that, like that scenario is not happening. My first initial prediction of where Final Fantasy would lead to, people buying other products. So again, Duskmorn, that's the big litmus test. That's where I'm keeping my eye on for where this market will be headed. But again, we still have another wave of Final Fantasy. Right now, the prices, I think the main reason why Final Fantasy sealed prices are going up is it's just not available. There are no distributors that have any reasonable quantities left. If they do, they're charging more, and of course then that's passed on to people selling it on places like platforms like eBay and TCG Player or online stores, because they had to pay for more for the product. And yeah, so we don't have a real gauge of if there was more supply out there where the market would be, and that will be answered in July when the next big wave comes. So yeah, I'm wondering too with the market if collector commanders are something that people are anticipating another wave of, because I believe they did do that with Warhammer. They pulled like a fast one, but Warhammer was also very interesting with the collector commanders because they crashed in value. Let's see if we can still find any data if it's too late for Warhammer collector commanders. Because they like crashed hard when they got that. No, I think I can't go back far enough. Maybe this is right on the tail end of when they crashed, because I know they were pre-sold for quite a bit, and then they crashed, and then it was where you'd lose money if you would have purchased them from distributors. And now you can see though this is insanely expensive, like $1,500, and they still sell, I believe. Like the last one did sell for. Yep, that's the most one ever sold for. It was about $1,300. So this is a little bit misleading. They are more like $1,000. This might just been desperation here. You might see people actually list these again for $1,000. But I know there's so many people that are kicking themselves for not either repurchasing the commander decks when they did get their second wave for the collector commanders. So this isn't something that isn't like collectors. Like collectors boosters from Final Fantasy, they probably can't get another reprint. However, the collector commanders absolutely can, because there's no serialized cards. It's just foil cards. It's very easy to do so. And if Wizards, as they saw with Warhammer, thinks that they can make a buck, again, they probably will print these. So maybe that's where the faith in the Final Fantasy collectors is leading for these ones to go down. But you would think that they would definitely be more sought after than the Warhammer collectors, because the IP and the collectability of them is a lot stronger than something like Warhammer. A lot of unknowns here. It's a crazy, crazy time to be in Magic the Gathering, especially the market end of Magic the Gathering. So hope you enjoyed this video. I'll try to get this more streamlined in the future and more focused in the future as we hit Market Mondays. Hold me to it. Want to start creating content, especially this particular video series again on this channel. As always, thanks for sticking around, and thanks for watching.